I think the Queen's duty and her service, her tolerance, her commitment.
5 minutes ago, everything Prince William believed about family loyalty shattered. While Catherine fought to recover from surgery at the London clinic, Camilla executed a plan so calculated, so ruthless, that the future king now questions whether the monarchy he will inherit can survive this betrayal. The truth is finally out. The devastating phone call. The call came at precisely 9:45 this morning, interrupting Prince William's breakfast with his 3 children at Adelaide Cottage. His private secretary's voice carried an urgency that immediately signaled something serious had occurred. Within moments, William excused himself from the table, leaving George, Charlotte, and Louis with their nanny, and retreated to his private study. What he learned in that conversation would fundamentally alter his understanding of the past year and shake his faith in the institution he has spent his entire life preparing to lead. A senior palace official, someone whose loyalty to the crown spanned 3 decades, had finally decided that silence was no longer an option. The burden of what they witnessed during Catherine's hospitalization in January of 2024 had become unbearable. The official explained that they had compiled documentation, witness statements, and recorded communications that painted a disturbing picture of Queen Camilla's activities during the Princess of Wales's recovery period. This wasn't speculation or gossip. These were facts, verified and cross-referenced, showing a pattern of behavior that could only be described as a systematic attempt to undermine Catherine at her most vulnerable moment. William listened in stunned silence as the official outlined what they had discovered. Phone calls made to senior media figures, private meetings with palace courtiers that deliberately excluded representatives from Kensington Palace, strategic briefings designed to shift public attention away from Catherine's importance to the royal family. All of this occurred while his wife lay in a hospital bed, recovering from major abdominal surgery, trusting that her family would protect and support her. The Prince of Wales felt his hands begin to shake as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a difference in communication styles. This was calculated, deliberate, and executed with precision during a period when William was completely focused on Catherine's recovery and their children's well-being. Camilla had exploited his distraction, his trust, and his wife's vulnerability. When the call ended, William sat motionless in his study for nearly 20 minutes. Staff members passing by the closed door could sense something had shifted, though they couldn't know what. The prince who had entered that room was different from the one who would eventually emerge. A line had been crossed, and there would be no going back to the carefully maintained fiction of family harmony. His first thought was of Catherine, now months into her recovery but still dealing with the physical and emotional aftermath of her surgery. Should he tell her immediately? Should he wait until he had verified every detail? The protective instinct that had defined their marriage warred with his respect for her right to know the truth. She deserved to understand what had happened while she fought to heal, but he also wanted to shield her from additional pain. William reached for his phone, then stopped. He needed to think clearly, to understand the full picture before deciding how to proceed. But one thing was certain: the relationship between Kensington Palace and Clarence House would never be the same. The trust that should exist between family members, especially within an institution as fragile as the modern monarchy, had been shattered beyond repair. A timeline of betrayal. The documentation provided to William revealed that Camilla's actions began within 48 hours of Catherine's admission to the London clinic on January 16, 2024. While the Prince of Wales maintained a bedside vigil, barely leaving his wife's side except to care for their children, the Queen Consort was already maneuvering. On January 18th, just 2 days after Catherine's surgery, Camilla requested an urgent meeting with the palace's senior communications team. The stated purpose was to discuss how the royal family would maintain its public presence during Catherine's absence. However, the actual content of that meeting went far beyond simple logistics. According to notes taken by attendees, Camilla suggested that the communications strategy should emphasize the monarchy's depth and resilience, specifically highlighting how senior royals could seamlessly absorb the duties of those unable to perform them. This might have seemed innocuous if not for the specific language used. Camilla repeatedly referenced the need to avoid any perception of vulnerability or weakness in the institution. She stressed that the public needed to see continuity and strength, not concern or sympathy for Catherine's situation. Several attendees felt uncomfortable with the implication that Catherine's health crisis should be minimized rather than acknowledged with appropriate compassion. By January 20th, Camilla had begun making personal calls to influential figures in British media. A prominent royal correspondent later confirmed receiving a call from the Queen Consort during this period. The conversation, presented as a casual check-in, included Camilla's observations about the demanding nature of royal life and subtle questions about whether the younger generation fully understood the relentless pace and pressure. The correspondent interpreted these comments as an attempt to plant seeds of doubt about Catherine's capacity to handle her future role. On January 22nd, 6 days into Catherine's hospital stay, Camilla convened a meeting with several of her key patrons. While officially positioned as routine engagement planning, the meeting included discussions about potential new partnerships and expanded roles for the Queen Consort. Sources present at this meeting noted that Camilla seemed particularly interested in areas that overlapped with Catherine's existing work, especially initiatives focused on early childhood development and family support. The timeline shows that Camilla also reached out directly to several organizations that Catherine had been cultivating relationships with over the previous years. These were not yet formal patronages but represented areas where the Princess of Wales had expressed strong interest and had been building connections. In conversations with these organizations, Camilla expressed her own enthusiasm for their work and made herself available for potential collaboration. While framed as support for important causes, the timing suggested an attempt to establish competing relationships. January 25th marked perhaps the most egregious action in this timeline. On this date, with Catherine still hospitalized and her recovery timeline uncertain, Camilla's office issued internal palace communications about planning for the spring season of royal engagements. These planning documents proposed an expanded role for the Queen Consort in high-profile events, including several that would traditionally involve the Princess of Wales. When staff from Kensington Palace questioned these proposals, they were told that given Catherine's health situation, flexibility was needed. Throughout the final days of January and into early February, as Catherine prepared to leave the hospital and continue her recovery at home, the pattern continued. Camilla maintained an aggressive schedule of engagements, ensuring maximum media coverage. Her team issued press releases and arranged photo opportunities that kept her firmly in the public eye. While any working royal maintaining their schedule would be commendable, the deliberate amplification of Camilla's visibility during Catherine's absence felt calculated. Behind the scenes, Camilla was also working to influence internal palace discussions about the future. In meetings with King Charles and senior advisors, she advocated for a more prominent role for herself in major royal events and decisions. She argued that as Queen Consort, she should be more centrally involved in strategic planning for the monarchy's future. These conversations happened without input from William or his team, creating a dynamic where decisions affecting the entire institution were being shaped by someone with a clear personal agenda. The documented timeline reveals that this wasn't impulsive behavior or a series of unfortunate coincidences. This was a coordinated campaign that began the moment opportunity presented itself and continued systematically throughout Catherine's most vulnerable period. Every action was designed to advance Camilla's position while subtly undermining confidence in Catherine's ability to fulfill her role as future queen. The medical privacy violations. Among the most disturbing revelations in the documentation William received were details about how Camilla sought information regarding Catherine's medical condition and recovery prognosis. What should have been private health information, protected by both medical confidentiality and basic family decency, became the subject of persistent inquiries from Clarence House. Starting on the third day of Catherine's hospitalization, Camilla's private secretary began making regular requests to Kensington Palace staff for updates on the princess's condition. Initially, these requests seemed appropriate, the concerned inquiries of a family member wanting to stay informed. However, the nature of the questions quickly moved beyond general well-being into specific medical details that raised red flags among William's team. Camilla wanted to know the exact nature of the abdominal surgery Catherine had undergone, information that the Princess and Prince of Wales had deliberately chosen to keep private. She pressed for details about the recovery timeline, asking specifically when Catherine would be physically capable of resuming various types of duties. She inquired about whether there would be any long-term limitations or ongoing medical needs that might affect Catherine's ability to maintain a full schedule of engagements. When Kensington Palace staff declined to provide detailed medical information, citing privacy concerns, Camilla attempted to go around them. She reached out directly to contacts within the London Clinic, the private hospital where Catherine was being treated. While the hospital's professional staff maintained appropriate confidentiality, the mere attempt to circumvent the family's privacy wishes represented a serious breach of trust. Most troubling were Camilla's attempts to use her position as queen consort to gain access to information. In one documented instance, she suggested to a senior palace official that as a member of the immediate royal family, she had a right to be fully informed about Catherine's medical situation for planning purposes. She argued that the monarchy's schedule and resource allocation required complete transparency about when Catherine would return to duties and at what capacity. This argument revealed a fundamental misunderstanding, whether genuine or convenient, of both medical privacy and family boundaries. Catherine's health information belonged to her and William to share or withhold as they saw fit. The fact that her recovery had implications for royal scheduling did not create an entitlement to detailed medical records. Palace insiders report that Camilla also tried to leverage her relationship with King Charles to access information. She encouraged the king to press William for more details about Catherine's condition, framing it as a father's natural concern for his daughter-in-law. Charles, to his credit, recognized this manipulation and refused to pressure his son, but the attempt itself demonstrated how far Camilla was willing to go. The medical privacy violations extended beyond just seeking information. Camilla also began sharing her own interpretations of Catherine's condition with others. Despite having no medical expertise and no direct knowledge of the actual situation, she offered opinions to courtiers and staff about what Catherine's extended recovery might indicate. These comments ranged from speculation about the severity of the surgery to suggestions that perhaps the princess was being overly cautious in her approach to healing. These unauthorized assessments then filtered into wider palace conversations, creating an atmosphere of doubt and speculation around Catherine's health. Staff members who should have been focused on supporting the princess's recovery instead found themselves dealing with rumors and managing perceptions that had been deliberately introduced into the palace ecosystem. When Catherine made the decision to be transparent about her recovery timeline, announcing publicly that she would not return to royal duties until after Easter, Camilla's response was particularly revealing. Rather than publicly supporting this decision, she privately questioned whether such an extended absence was truly necessary. In conversations with her inner circle, she suggested that royal duty sometimes required pushing through discomfort, and that perhaps Catherine was setting a precedent that could be problematic for the institution. These comments demonstrated a callous disregard for Catherine's actual medical needs and a prioritization of institutional optics over individual well-being. They also revealed Camilla's willingness to second-guess medical decisions made by doctors, the patient, and her family, despite having no relevant knowledge or authority to do so. Strategic manipulation of public perception. While Camilla's actions behind palace walls were disturbing enough, her manipulation of public perception represented an even more sophisticated level of calculation. The documentation William reviewed included evidence of a coordinated media strategy designed to reshape how the public viewed both Camilla's role and Catherine's position within the royal family. The strategy relied heavily on Camilla's cultivated relationships with specific journalists and media outlets. Over the years, she had carefully built a network of media contacts who could be relied upon to present favorable coverage. These weren't official palace correspondents operating through proper channels. These were personal relationships that existed outside the formal communication structure, giving Camilla the ability to shape narratives without accountability. During Catherine's hospitalization and early recovery, these relationships were activated with precision. Stories began appearing in major British newspapers praising Camilla's tireless dedication to duty and her steady hand during a challenging period for the royal family. These articles consistently used language emphasizing strength, experience, and reliability, qualities implicitly contrasted against Catherine's absence. One particularly coordinated effort involved multiple outlets running variations of the same story about how Camilla had stepped up to fill the gap left by Catherine's health issues. These pieces highlighted the Queen Consort's busy schedule and her willingness to take on additional responsibilities. While factually accurate in terms of describing Camilla's activities, the framing created a narrative that Catherine's role was fungible, that her contributions could be easily replaced by a more experienced royal. The media strategy also included carefully timed releases of information about Camilla's patronages and initiatives. Announcements that could have been made at any point were strategically scheduled to coincide with periods when Catherine would have normally been in the news. This ensured that searches for royal family news would predominantly feature Camilla rather than updates about Catherine's recovery. Camilla's team also worked to elevate her profile internationally during this period. Outreach was made to international media outlets, offering exclusive access and interviews that positioned the Queen Consort as the primary voice of the modern British monarchy. These efforts were particularly focused on Commonwealth nations, where the next generation's relationship with the Crown would be crucial for the institution's future. Behind these public-facing efforts was a more subtle campaign to influence opinion among key stakeholders. Camilla personally reached out to influential figures in British society, from business leaders to cultural icons, hosting small private events that allowed her to build relationships and shape perceptions. At these gatherings, she would carefully craft her message about the monarchy's future, emphasizing themes of experience and continuity that indirectly questioned whether the younger generation was ready for leadership. The documentation shows that Camilla's media team also engaged in negative briefing against Catherine, though always with plausible deniability. Anonymous sources would share concerns about whether the Princess of Wales was suited for the demands of her future role, whether her health issues indicated deeper problems with stress management, and whether the monarchy might need to reconsider how it approached succession planning. These briefings were subtle enough to avoid direct attribution, but persistent enough to plant doubt. One source revealed that Camilla had even suggested to friendly journalists that they should explore questions about Catherine's commitment to royal duty. She framed these suggestions as legitimate journalistic inquiry, asking whether the princess's prioritization of her children and her health over constant public visibility represented a new model of royal service or an abdication of responsibility. The strategic manipulation extended to social media as well. While Camilla herself maintained a limited social media presence, her team monitored online conversations about the royal family and worked to amplify narratives that favored the Queen Consort. Positive comments about Camilla's work were highlighted and shared through various channels, while discussions of Catherine's contributions were noticeably absent from the content promoted by Clarence House. Perhaps most cunningly, Camilla positioned herself as a bridge between traditional royal values and modern expectations. She gave carefully crafted interviews where she acknowledged the challenges facing the monarchy while presenting herself as someone who understood both the weight of history and the need for evolution. This positioning allowed her to appear progressive and relevant, while subtly suggesting that others in the family might be stuck in outdated approaches or unprepared for contemporary demands. The institutional consequences. The revelations about Camilla's behavior during Catherine's hospital stay have created institutional consequences that extend far beyond personal relationships. The modern British monarchy operates on carefully maintained protocols, established hierarchies, and most importantly, trust between its key figures. Camilla's actions have damaged all three of these foundational elements. Within the palace system, the breakdown of trust between Kensington Palace and Clarence House has created operational nightmares. The two households must coordinate on countless matters, from scheduling public engagements to managing shared resources to presenting unified positions on institutional questions. This coordination requires open communication and good faith assumption that all parties are working toward common goals. That assumption no longer exists. Staff members describe an atmosphere of suspicion and careful information management that has replaced the previous collaborative approach. Kensington Palace now treats every communication with Clarence House as potentially compromised, every piece of shared information as ammunition that might be used against the Wales family. This defensive posture is exhausting and inefficient, but it feels necessary given what has been revealed about Camilla's willingness to exploit access and trust. The king finds himself in an impossible position, caught between institutional responsibility and personal loyalty. As monarch, Charles has a duty to ensure the royal family functions effectively as a unit. The fracture between his wife and his son threatens this functionality in ways that could become publicly visible and damaging. Yet his love for Camilla and his decades-long commitment to her make it nearly impossible for him to take the decisive action that might be required to address her behavior. This paralysis at the top creates a leadership vacuum that affects the entire institution. Decisions that should be made quickly and clearly are instead delayed or avoided entirely because they might require choosing between competing interests within the family. Strategic planning for the monarchy's future becomes nearly impossible when the key figures can't agree on basic principles of how they should work together. The situation has also affected the monarchy's relationship with the British government. The Prime Minister and senior ministers rely on the royal family to perform certain constitutional and ceremonial functions. They need confidence that the institution is stable and functional. Whispers of internal conflict and power struggles raise concerns about whether the monarchy can fulfill its responsibilities, potentially opening conversations about its continued relevance that palace officials desperately want to avoid. Within the Commonwealth realms, questions are emerging about the succession and what it will mean for their relationship with the crown. Several Commonwealth nations already face active Republican movements questioning the need for a British monarch as head of state. If those movements can point to dysfunction within the royal family itself, their arguments gain credibility. The conflict between William and Camilla, should it become widely known, could accelerate discussions about severing ties to the monarchy. The financial implications are also significant. The royal family's funding comes from public money through the sovereign grant and from private income through the Duchy of Lancaster and Duchy of Cornwall. Public support for this funding model depends on the perception that taxpayers are getting value, that the royal family is fulfilling its duties effectively and representing British values admirably. Internal conflicts and personal power plays undermine this perception and strengthen arguments for reducing royal funding. For the staff who serve the royal family, the current situation creates ethical dilemmas and professional challenges. Many of these individuals have dedicated their careers to the institution, believing in its importance and taking pride in supporting its work. Watching senior royals engage in behavior that damages the institution forces them to question their loyalty and consider whether they can continue serving an organization that tolerates such conduct. The institutional damage extends to the monarchy's moral authority as well. The royal family has long positioned itself as exemplifying certain values: duty, service, dignity, and putting country before self. When senior members are revealed to be engaging in petty power struggles and undermining family members during medical crises, it destroys the carefully cultivated image of principled leadership. If the royals can't maintain basic decency within their own family, why should the public look to them for moral guidance or respect their position? There are also concerns about precedent. If Camilla faces no consequences for her actions, it sends a message that such behavior is acceptable within the royal system. Future generations might feel empowered to engage in similar manipulation and competition, creating a culture of internal conflict that would make the institution unsustainable. Alternatively, if serious consequences are imposed, it could create a public spectacle that damages the monarchy's reputation, even as it attempts to enforce standards. The timing of this crisis is particularly problematic given the monarchy's current challenges. With King Charles still establishing his reign after the long shadow of Queen Elizabeth's rule, with public opinion polls showing declining support for the institution among younger Britons, and with economic pressures making royal spending a sensitive political issue, the last thing the monarchy needs is evidence of internal dysfunction and personal betrayal. A family and monarchy forever changed. The discovery of what Camilla did during Catherine's hospital stay marks a turning point from which there is no return to the previous status quo. The relationships, the trust, and the assumptions that structured life within the royal family have been fundamentally altered. What emerges from this crisis will determine not just personal dynamics, but the trajectory of the British monarchy for decades to come. For Prince William, the revelations force a complete reassessment of his approach to royal life and his future reign. He had believed, perhaps naively, that the institution could function as both a family and a professional organization, that personal relationships and duty could coexist harmoniously. The reality that someone within his family would actively undermine his wife during a medical crisis has shattered that belief. Going forward, he will approach the monarchy with greater skepticism and self-protection, treating it more as a political institution requiring constant vigilance than as a family enterprise deserving of trust. This shift in William's perspective will likely influence how he eventually rules as king. The warmth and accessibility that he and Catherine had hoped to bring to the modernized monarchy may be tempered by a more guarded, protective approach. The experiences of this period could make him less willing to be vulnerable, less open to collaboration, and more focused on consolidating power and control to prevent future betrayals. Catherine faces perhaps the most difficult path forward. She must continue in a role that requires her to work alongside someone who betrayed her, to maintain public appearances of family unity while privately dealing with the hurt and anger of what was done to her. The Princess of Wales has always approached her royal duties with grace and dedication, but this experience may fundamentally change her relationship with the institution. The question is whether she can find a way to continue serving effectively while protecting herself emotionally from future harm. The impact on their children cannot be overlooked. George, Charlotte, and Louis are growing up watching how their parents navigate this crisis. They are learning lessons about trust, loyalty, and institutional power that will shape how they eventually approach their own royal roles. If they see their father forced to accept betrayal without consequence, it teaches them that the institution matters more than personal dignity. If they see their mother hurt by family members, it affects their own willingness to trust and be vulnerable within the family structure. King Charles faces a legacy-defining decision. He can attempt to maintain peace by minimizing the significance of Camilla's actions, effectively prioritizing short-term stability over accountability and justice. This might preserve family harmony on the surface but would leave deep resentment festering and set a dangerous precedent. Alternatively, he can acknowledge the severity of what occurred and insist on genuine accountability, even if that creates short-term conflict and public discomfort. This choice will define how history remembers his reign and his values as a father and monarch. For Camilla herself, the exposure of her actions during Catherine's hospital stay represents a crisis of her own. She has spent years working to overcome her complicated history and establish herself as a respected member of the royal family. The revelation that she was willing to undermine Catherine at such a vulnerable moment threatens to undo that rehabilitation in the public eye. If these details become widely known, the sympathy and acceptance she has gradually built could evaporate, leaving her more isolated and criticized than at any point since she married Charles. The broader institution must also reckon with systemic issues that allowed this situation to develop. The royal family operates with remarkable autonomy and minimal external oversight. Individual members have significant freedom to build their own teams, develop their own strategies, and pursue their own agendas. While this decentralization can be efficient, it also creates opportunities for the kind of competition and conflict that has now erupted. Meaningful reform might require new structures for coordination, accountability, and conflict resolution within the royal household system. Looking ahead, several possible scenarios could emerge from this crisis. In the most optimistic outcome, the revelations lead to honest conversations, genuine accountability, and structural reforms that ultimately strengthen the institution by addressing its weaknesses. William and Camilla find a way to coexist professionally, if not personally. Clear boundaries are established, and the monarchy adapts to prevent future conflicts. A darker scenario involves continued deterioration of relationships, eventual public exposure of the conflict, and serious damage to the monarchy's reputation and viability. The rift between William and Charles could become unbridgeable, creating a dysfunctional situation that persists for years and undermines both the current reign and the future succession. A middle path might see the family maintaining public unity while privately operating as separate, barely coordinating entities. William and Catherine would essentially create an independent operation preparing for their eventual reign, while Charles and Camilla focus on the present, with minimal collaboration between the two camps. This would be functional but cold, lacking the warmth and genuine unity that makes the royal family compelling to the public. What seems certain is that the innocent belief in family loyalty within the palace walls is gone, replaced by a more cynical understanding of institutional politics and personal ambition. The next generation of royals will operate with that knowledge, for better or worse, as they navigate their own paths through an institution that has proven itself capable of profound betrayal. The monarchy has survived scandals, divorces, and even abdication in its long history. Whether it can survive the particular challenge of this internal betrayal, this calculated undermining of a future queen by a current queen consort, remains to be seen. But the royal family that emerges from this crisis will be fundamentally different from the one that entered it, shaped permanently by the discovery of what Camilla did during Catherine's hospital stay. The reverberations from this discovery will echo through the House of Windsor for generations. Prince William now faces choices that will define not just his own future, but the future of the British monarchy itself. Can trust be rebuilt, or is this betrayal too profound to overcome? Should consequences be demanded, or should institutional stability take priority? The answers to these questions will shape the crown's destiny. What would you do in William's position? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for continuing coverage of this unprecedented royal crisis that threatens to reshape the monarchy forever.